All right, everybody, we are live, and this is a very special episode number 17 of the Rob Anderson Show. And today I'm very honored to have my guest on, Mira Anicic. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Did I pronounce it right? Okay. So Mira, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And yeah, so we had a wonderful chat just before we started recording, and I didn't want to get too carried away because I wanted to keep the real meat and potatoes of the conversation for our recorded discussion. So thank you once again for joining me, and just tell me a little bit about yourself for the viewers out there, who you are, and kind of maybe how we met and why we're here, and excited to have this conversation today.
Yes. Thank you for having me again. I met Rob through a spiritual community that I'm part of. We have amazing conversations once a week. Um, I'm Mira Anicic, and I'm a rapid transformational therapist and coach. And when I say rapid, that is a true program created by Marissa Peer, and it does truly work, and it's rapid. Within 3 hours of therapy, a person completely turns around life. They understand the programs that run their life, and then they find, locate the programs, they talk to it, they release and clear out of their system. And then over 21-day period, they override those programs and they start a brand new life. It is next to being miraculous, really. So my passion is mind. I learned about mind, ins and outs, how it works, and try to understand it and learn about it every single day. So I help people to understand that mechanism, and how it basically runs your life unless you turn around and coach your mind to do what you actually wanted to do for you. So we will talk more about that in our conversation.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and thank you for sharing that. And we wanted to speak a little bit about today because I know that if you get, the past few years, there's been a big influx of spirituality into things because of COVID. People were on lockdown, looking for truth, not knowing where to go, confused, which I think, confusion is the first step to saying, hey, something's not right here. Like, there's got to be something more to what's going on. And so, everybody's got a spiritual journey. I think in essence, we are light beings or spirits in bodies experiencing what it's like to be in this version of humans, but with a very heavy mind. We're in the genetic mind of humanity, if you want to call it, and that can be a dark place because it exists in duality. And so, how to maybe minimize the effects of that. And so, we were talking about true spirituality and versus the false light, because there is a lot of spirituality that really kind of almost goes back into a religious like thing or cult like thing, or people preaching you got to do this and you got to do that, or you got to all these gurus. They don't teach. I'm very weary of anybody that teaches anything aside from going within and doing the own work, right? And so you mentioned true spirituality and false light, so tell me a little bit about your journey with that and how you've overcome it, and how I know you're working with people, so and how that looks with the work you're doing.
I was born into Eastern Orthodox Christian family, and over the time, I got very familiar with that religion. I studied it day in, day out for years. I read the Bible multiple times. I read some books, so-called Holy Fathers books, about stuff that some people told me, like, you're total nuts for reading it, because unless you're at a certain level of consciousness back in a day in old energies, that was almost driving some people crazy to read that material. I had no issues with it, but it helps me now to understand what's actually happening. And what I concluded the other day talking to one person is that, um, uh, people grow within a religion to a certain level, and that they notice that it just doesn't bring them any good. And we innately know that we are supposed to grow all the time until we take our last breath. We are to work on ourselves and grow. And then if you notice that something is not giving you that material to grow or space to grow any longer, you know, and that was me in 2017. So I opened up to different spiritual communities and teachings, and I learned a lot. It was really fast paced, and a switch from religion to spirituality. Just to notice that a lot of people try to switch. They get disappointed with corrupt religion, and
Mhm.
they want to move away from it. They want to start something new. They want to call themselves spiritual rather than religious. They want to clear out the dogma and infiltration from the church, and they want to start something brand new, claiming that they are pure and sound in everything that they teach, and yet they just slip back into the same old, same old. So from what I personally notice in a mainstream spiritual community today is that there is a lot of infiltration. There is absolutely a lot of infiltration within spiritual community and lots of misunderstandings. And a lot of those souls who try to lead people are actually still following the false light, because people don't understand that in the era of duality and the old energies and throughout the dark ages, there was a situation of source and anti-source. And anti-source in the dark ages was presented as God, as Yahweh in the Old Testament. That's not the source, light of source. That's not the real God. And people still fall for it. And then if you read the Bible, when Jesus was walking the earth, he was telling people, those people who were the best of the knowledge and the closest to God and had the covenants and had all things, right? What did he tell them? He told them, you do not know God. Right. So and a lot of that is still interwoven into spiritual community today. People
Yeah.
do not distinctively make that they don't have a clear picture. Okay, this is the anti-source God, and this is the real true organic light source God. And you see that there are three main groups. One of them are just talking about love and light and ascension into 5D, and extraterrestrials will pick us all up and take to another planet and whatnot. The other group is talking only about RV and money and whatnot, and the third group is all talking about I don't know. Um, what else is there? Like we the people will take over the laws and the banks, and we're going to um, to make a balance, right? So if you look at what's happening, basically is that the people are trying to make a balance with the dark, because they believe that we're going into neutral age and that the ages will repeat again in the full cycle, neutral light, neutral dark. But that's not the case. Very few people know that we're out of ages. Ages will never repeat again. We're going back to light, and it's a game change. It's a game changer. So going forward, people will be offered to either work on themselves, go to light, drop all the old and negative and dark, and move on with majority of people who want to do that, or they will simply have to leave.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's very, very confusing because, probably similar to your journey, like me too. Like when something's bothering me or I'm interested in something, it's like, I gotta find the answers here. I searched so long. It's like seeking and seeking and seeking. And it's like, you will find things in the outside. I kind of think it's kind of a reflection slash projection kind of, we'll find if we're in our hearts, what is meant for us will show up. That's how the universe works. That's how what people call God is supposed to work. But it's like you said, source is very important. It's kind of the forgetting, or the God forgetting itself, and not realizing that there's so much more to this visible spectrum that we see, and so it's so confusing because everybody, for some reason, it's really difficult for people, and I still struggle with it every day, is to realize that the power is within us, right? So everybody, and all these different types of spiritual things, they think that, oh, well, meditations are going to get you there. Hail Marys, that's no different than religion, or incantations, affirmations, summoning spirits, ancestors, astrology. That's all dark mind energy, because it's all taking you away from the fact that you are divine already. You don't have to do anything. I liked something I was reading recently. I think it was The Way of Mastery, and it said, it speaks about what Jesus said, the kingdom is within you, and the kingdom is a decision away. We are the creators of our reality. We can search, you can go to live as a monk in the mountains for 17 years. You might not find the same spirituality as you do going to have a beer with somebody down at the bar, because there's no there's no prescription, there's no guide to spirituality. It's the realizing, it's just a decision away to being like, holy geez, I'm a fractal of source manifested into this physical reality. I don't need to do anything to get to God. I'm not going to meet some guy who is God and who's going to let me through the pearly gates after I die, and then everything's going to be sweet and I'm going to be in heaven and I'm going to be living on the beach and there's going to be girls feeding me grapes. Like, that's not realistic. That's not heaven. There's no exploration experience. And it's all those things. So when you talk about true spirituality and false light, is they almost the new age movement and a lot of the spiritual movement right now is almost getting back into cult-like behavior. And that's what we got to get away from. We got to get more to nature. If there's going to be any type of spirituality, it's in nature. It's in doing what you love. It's in resonating and removing judgment and having a little bit more compassion and understanding. And so another thing that we wanted to talk about today, and you mentioned, is kind of the voice in our head and being inspired from spirit. And I kind of think that, like, the word inspiration has, it almost has spirit in it, right? So and you can just tell when you're in the flow, when you're doing something. For me, it's like when I'm making music or dancing or riding my motorcycle or talking about a topic that I'm excited about. I don't need a script. You don't need to, you don't, even though there's a little bit of worry about, stage fright, like when we were both going on, I always get a little bit nervous, but once you're in it, it's like you're being on stage and you know what you're doing and it's all good. So how do we distinguish between the voice in our head as the ego or the voice in the heart and the Holy Spirit and living from, the heart versus, the ego mind?
Where do you want to start? Do you want me start with ego versus mind to give a little lecture about that? Because people don't really clearly understand what ego is.
Yeah, well,
Right.
it's difficult, right? Because we'll start there, because when I was in university and stuff, it's like, it seems like this word, obviously the English language we attribute to, but it's like, it seems like something that you can't explain. And it took me years, and I don't even know if I remember talking to teachers and they were like, yeah, ego. And I was like, yeah, like I understood, but I was like afraid to tell people. I'm like, I still don't understand what ego is. It's like somebody made up this word with a definition that nobody knows. So, but people are all just like, yeah, it's totally ego. So explain what ego is.
It's very interesting. It's interesting to me to watch that, because whenever something happens that people don't have any explanation, they're just, oh, that's your ego. You act out of ego. Just get out of ego. Quiet down your ego. And I'm thinking, like, do they actually know what ego is? Because, when you see, like, in what kind of sentence they use the word ego, it's clear to me that they don't really.
Yeah.
So with your permission, I would just quickly go over, like, what mind is.
For sure. Yeah, go ahead.
First, right? So people know about the holy trinity of human being, right? So we have body, we have soul, we have spirit that keeps us alive. And nobody talks about mind. And yet mind is something that keeps us, can make it or break it for us, and most often keeps us stuck. And if they, so it's auxiliary kind of equipment that was added to body, soul, and spirit. And this mind, when people start talking about mind, they think it's in our brain, that it's kind of physical, but it's not really, because your thoughts are actually energy, right? It's a thought form is energy. It's not material, and it's not contained in your mind, in your brain, right? Your brain is just used for certain function.
More like a
So
receiver, right?
right. So your brain is there. So your mind was given to human being um, as a processing unit. So you were given five senses to see, smell, talk, hear, right? So you walk around your life and you gather information from your environment. And all that information goes to your brain for computation, right? So depending on what you gather from your environment and you compute in your mind, in your brain, then you decide on your corresponding action. It's basically a little computer that you have, but your corresponding action, is usually driven by your subconscious mind and the programs that are there and you're not even aware of. Because whatever you see and perceive in your environment goes to brain, but it then gets processed and gets cross-referenced with all the programs that you ever got from the point of time when you were conceived, right? All the programs, all the, transgenerational memory, cellular memory, all of your experiences, everything that ever happened to you.
Mhm.
Even if you're just going shopping and trying to decide on your shirt that you want to buy, it still goes all through all that, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
it's a physical mechanics, computer that helps you process all that information. But what that energetic thought is, it's basically a movie that runs through your consciousness, right? So consciousness is like a TV screen that's watching a movie, right? And your consciousness is something that's always kind of constant.
It's
It's your
like the observer, right? Like
it's
you're,
observer. It's your TV frame or something like TV screen, right? It's always constant, but your mind is always changing, right? Like, you just wake up every morning, you see something, start thinking, everything changes every moment of the time. And ego was a pre-programmed thing within your mind. So it is a program that was put there for first humans for protection. So ego was supposed to keep you safe, and it was supposed to give you identity. So as human beings are created with free will, it was necessary for them to have identity, to know who they are so they can exercise their free will. And also, it was important for them to be kept safe because we didn't want that to happen, that the humans get just extinct from the planet.
Mhm.
So your ego was there to say, hey, I'm human. I know what's best for me. I know that I can eat this food. I know I cannot eat this food. I know this animal is safe. This animal is not safe, right? So that egoistic thing actually helped us survive, and it was successful. There are 8 billion of us. But what people don't understand is that in this modern world, we live in a completely safe environment, and our mind is still screening our environment and screening for trouble. So what you see more often than not is that people go to the office and they're like, oh, this guy didn't look at me. Oh, am I in trouble? Oh, my boss
Mhm.
gave me the, you know what I mean? Because that's what mind was given to you to do, and ego was given to you to keep you safe. But if you think that it is there just to kind of, trip you and make you fall, you kind of distant from that auxiliary equipment that you have. But if you understand that, like, hey, you have mind to screen your environment, keep you safe, help you process all this information, and help you decide on corresponding action, right? And help you exercise your free will and see what you decide with your life and what you want to do, then it's a game changer. Right. And if you know that, like, hey, I'm safe, not, there's no tiger, outside my door. And if my mind is kind of screening and tells me that, this spider is very dangerous in my corner, that, like, I should know better by now, right?
Yeah.
But nobody teaches people this.
Well, exactly. And that's you made some awesome points and so much I wanted to touch base on, but all of it seems to do, it's like, that's how I felt very strongly that in this, realm or whatever frequency range we live in, there is a lot of mind control, whether people want to admit that it's nefarious or done by people who know exactly what they're doing. They know how the mind works. They know how the human anatomy works. They know very well. They're the geneticists who designed humans. They know how to manipulate the mind. And so everybody, that a lot of what's on the news and the outside world, I like your analogy, is convince people to stay scared and inside because there's a tiger outside their door. And if they go out into the outside world, oh, it's bad. There's COVID. Oh, I said that. Hopefully, I might have to leave that out. But all these things we look at, I can't even say it on my show for certain reasons. But there's always an enemy at the gates, so to speak, right? And it's outside, and so what we're really learning, because the ego wants to control, classify, arrange, and filter down all its things. And like you said, it had its purpose at one time, but it's become almost abused. And so we have to, I think that's what people who say you got to totally dissolve the ego. Well, we're not that, to me, that's like going back into spirit or oneness. We want to keep our separate identities. Like my spirit will always be me. You'll always, even in the next life, you'll always be Mira kind of thing. We'll have our own separate energies, our own frequency band or whatever you want to call it. So I think that separateness, like I don't see anything ever. I heard one gentleman say that once you're created, you're created. It's, however that works, your spirit. But, this new age movement where everybody's going to turn into a ball of light and go back into source. That's not the point of creation. Creation is meant to extend and go on for infinite possibilities, right? So we're always going to have that kind of separate identity or reference point in our consciousness, whatever our experience is. Maybe it's just there's different dimensions and different bodies that we might take on in different dimensions or different frequency bands, or it might not always be this physical 3D reality, but we will always have what we consider as us, ourselves, right? And we might be part of bigger collectives, but I think that that's what you realize is that, oh, when I see, because I look at everybody honestly, and I do it, I've done it consciously since I was a kid, but I always look at everybody as brothers and sisters, and I don't know, like we grew up in this ego competitive thing that was, I don't know if it's like this false competition, but there is a lot of competition bred in, like you got to get ahead, you got to, it seems like if you take a step up, somebody else has to take a step down kind of a society, right? And so it's a very ego-driven society. And I think that's what we're shifting from, is from the ego-driven society to the heart-based society. And that doesn't mean that ego is completely going to dissolve, because it still grounds me in who I am. So we talked about boundaries and spiritual boundaries. My ego lets me say, otherwise you're getting almost psychic attacks like that. And that's what happened the past few years was, it was like, well, you got to do this. Otherwise you're not, but there was no freedom for the individuality in that and the sovereignty. And I think that's very ego driven. So as we move into the heart and we realize that, hey, we're the co-creators, we're realizing our God consciousness, that we're from source. And maybe that's what people refer to as waking up or the great remembering. And it's that we're so much more powerful than we're led to believe, right? And that we don't need to hide inside and watch the news to tell, Russia's coming, oh, there's another third world war, aliens are coming, Jesus is coming back. I'm telling you, if you see Jesus and he comes back, that's false light.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ego is not going anywhere. It's part of you forever. It's not going anywhere, right? So you have to learn what that part of you is. And if you punch it to the ground, it's basically you cutting off part of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we need to understand that we are all individual, unique, energetic stamp, imprint into this life. Right. And what we can use ego to our advantage now is, hey, like I have my identity. I know that you're you, you're my other you, but there is a reason why you exist in a shape and form as you do, because the source wants to experience life through you in your unique way.
Yeah.
So what you can use ego for is like, hey, we are unique. There is no other person like us in the whole universe.
Mm-hmm.
So what can I do different from my fellow brother, that can add value to our new heaven on earth that we're about to create? What can I do different? Not because I'm different or because I'm separate, but because I want to add value. To the overall collective.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of
Yeah.
the ways you can work with ego, but it's always there, and it will always stay with you. And the less you resist, and the more you know it and get to work with it in a way that it likes it, it's easier for everyone.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's why, for myself, I'm looking to use my brain and rather than, because we all have to do the work, because it's easy for me I think that like darkness lies in the future, worrying about the future or the past. It's like when you're present in the moment, like you said, there's no tiger at the door, everything's good. Your point of power is in this present moment. So all your future moments, if you take control of this one and don't let your mind race and just put it towards an objective. So it's like, doing things that you love, heart-based things, going for a walk, taking care of yourself, singing, dancing, playing with people, being lighthearted. To me, those are all things that have helped me kind of get out of my head and into my heart, you know? And that's the thing. And I was reading somewhere that it's very difficult to make that transition because you kind of get sucked back in, and it's like, you know, especially with when you live within a society and the structure, it's very different. You know, I think a lot of people realize that the past couple of years that it's difficult to stand on your own and say, you know what, I do want to be part of the collective, but not the ego collective, the heart collective. And that's no offense to people that are stuck in the mind, but I'm not compromising on this because this is not how I have the integrity. And it was tough, right? So how do we look at the heart-based spiritual, you know, Holy Spirit or spirited decision making from our heart center rather than our mind or our brain or our ego? How have you learned to do that, and what can people do?
Well, let me tell you first that the strongest, I'm going to say this very slowly because it needs to sink in. The strongest force within every single human being is that they have to act, behave, and live in a way that is consistent with their thinking. There is no stronger force within you. So if you want to change the outcome, you have to change the way how you think. And what's also very important for people to understand is that your mind runs by algorithm. There are 17 or about 22 main rules of the mind. And there is one that is very important to mention here. And it says that your mind always keeps you with that which is familiar and makes sure you stay away from that which is unfamiliar.
Yeah.
So even if you want to change something and you don't really truly change your thinking, and your whole being doesn't change into, you know, that direction, you will not have the favorable outcome or what you wanted to see.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you want to change something, it has to start with your thinking, how you think. Now, as I said at the beginning, people also got confused with the knowledge, you know, they need to make a distinction between knowledge and wisdom, right? And a lot of people are proud of that, how many books they read, how much they have in their mind, how quickly they can, you know, give you the answer or, you know, whatever. But as I said, your mind was given to you to gather information, compute it, process it, and by using your free will to help you decide what you want to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you decide what you do with it and you live your life and you see how that actually works, that's when you gain your wisdom.
Yeah. And
And
you know
it's
what? Yeah, go ahead, finish.
it's a great difference between knowledge and wisdom. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like if you just read books and you try to teach people, and that's what I have very hard time with a lot of therapists and coaches out there. You know, they took a course and they're teaching other people how to live good life. But if you didn't really go through a hell of a life on this planet, you know, and if you haven't you know, if you haven't got out of a lot of that, how can you teach someone? You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's nearly impossible. You know, to me, you have knowledge from the book and you don't have wisdom, nor you can feel from your being and from your heart to help that client who is in a dire need to be helped.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you have to have that wisdom. It's not only about like, hey, you know, they told me, you know, do this, do that, and ask them stupid questions. Like, even if you ask them correct questions and they give you an answer, you don't know what to do with it. Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe it's a good time now to circle back to inspiration question, right? How do you know you're inspired? So practically, you know, if you train yourself to use your mind just to gather information, if you want to read a book, by all means, read the book. Use your mind to read the book, collect
Mm-hmm.
information, decide what you got out of it, and forget about it. Don't think about it any longer. right? That's the problem, that people keep on thinking about stuff that happened in the past, and then they teach you, oh, be present. Well, if you keep on thinking about something that happened in the past, whether it was good or bad, you're not present.
Exactly.
Right? So
Yeah.
unless you do something, unless you read a book, unless you do your job, unless you cook, unless you drive, unless you do something physically, where you need to engage your mind to kind of think like, okay, what do I do? What do I do next? Right? Don't use it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a tricky thing, right? And I'm actually practicing not thinking.
Right?
You know, I
So,
wake up and I say and I got all these thoughts racing through my mind, and I do deep breathing, and I say, you know what? Just nope, nope,
right.
not thinking about it. Like, and it's not denial or anything. It's that it's just not the proper time, and I will address certain things. That I heard a good saying is that we often cross bridges before we get there. So it's like we start planning, oh, what this bridge is going to be like when we get there, and it's like we don't know what just imagine you don't know what and how often, even the past week, preparing for Christmas, it was plans change so quickly, and it's like you start preparing and making this thing, and then somebody's train's late or a flight gets delayed, and then the thing that you've been stressing out about never comes to be, and all this plan, so I'm learning to live presently in the moment, and it's difficult, right? It really is.
Well, I'll give you a nice tool that you can rely on. I heard that from a very dear sort of friend, I guess, Jason Estes. He says basically you need to run your life with this rule: do the best you can with what you have and deal with what's in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
and forget everything else.
Yeah, that's the best way. It's like
Right?
that.
So if something is not in front of you, if war in Gaza is not in front of you, don't think about it, don't talk about it, because
Yeah,
you're not helping anyone.
no,
You're not helping anyone, right? If it
no.
is in front of you and you can do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
So to act out of your heart, I believe what's very important is that you train your mind not to think unless it's asked to think, right? Instead of allowing mind to run your life, you become the owner of your being, and you say to mind like, okay, now I don't need you. Take rest. I'm not talking to you. I don't want to think about anything. Is something in front of me to do? No. I'm going to meditate, right? And learn to live in meditation, not just to have it as a practice, to do it at a certain time of the day.
That's a very
Just
good point.
right. It is like we need to start living the meditation, be in
That
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 meditative state, right?
Yeah,
And,
meditate from meditation to meditative, and that's why I focus on
yeah.
my breathing, because if you have to go to something, I used to smoke cigarettes for like 24 years or 20, I don't even remember. It doesn't matter because it's not in front of me. But I've been focusing on my breathing the past 2.5 years since I quit, and it keeps on getting better and better. And we can regulate so much of our energy just through our breathing. And a lot of times when we're thinking about the past or worrying about the future, we stop breathing. So if you notice, if you're really consciously aware and you start practicing that, it's like, wow, how often in my life did I stop breathing before? Because I would get tense and start thinking about things, and you're not letting the energy flow, right?
And that's the very bad thing, when people are experiencing something, they stop breathing,
Yeah,
and they don't understand that, that split second between your in breath and out breath, like you breathe in and you breathe out, and that split second is when divinity works within you. And if you stop breathing, you imprint that stress within you, and you create new program right there and then, because you're not able to breathe and move it through. So Dr.
exactly.
Hewland was really big on talking about this. I loved his work. I learned from him. He passed a few years ago, unfortunately, but he's a creator of Ho'oponopono, modern day Ho'oponopono, and he was talking about that, going back to zero. And what does it mean? He says that all this information that we gather up throughout the life, all you're supposed to do is gather up something, decide on your corresponding action. You're supposed to release all that, erase all that. So he said, he was teaching us that all that information that we still store in our subconscious and conscious mind is nothing else but junk data.
Hmm.
if you don't use that information to make a corresponding action at this point of time in the present, you don't need it. It's junk data. And you basically need to do good defragmentation of your system, just like we do with computers, because that information is very useless.
Yeah.
So what he was teaching us was, okay, just clear that, clear that, clear that. And, the more you clear your mind and the less you think about stuff when you're not supposed to or not required to think about anything, you get close to that 0 point, right? When you just be, you are
Mhm.
in a state of being.
Mhm.
You're quiet, you're just there. And that's when you get that voice telling you the true stuff. Your higher self, God Himself, divinity, tells you inspirational things. And that's when you're moved to do divine
Yeah.
acts and create out of divine inspiration and not act out of the junk, corrupt data that is in your system.
I love it. Yeah. And that's to touch on what you said before, the mind wants to keep you with what's familiar. And so I look at it as actionable steps. I try to do something new every day, and it doesn't have to be, some days I'll go on a different path on my walk. Some days, like I told you about creative scheduling, about, picking things out of a thing and doing it, surprising myself, being spontaneous. Or maybe it's letting something go. That's something new today. Like if you have a resentment that you've been harboring, and sometimes it just doesn't, it comes out of nowhere. It's doing something new every day. You don't have to go skydiving. I always tell people you don't have to do, those are good things. Maybe some days that's the new thing you're going to do, but it just can be a little thing, like one little step towards a goal that you that you're working towards. Maybe it's like, letting go of that last photo of your last relationship, saying, you know what, it's time to put this to bed. That's something new. That's release. That's letting go. It's making, defragging the hard drive, like you said. It's clearing up the space. And so that's a powerful way. Just try to do something new every day, or see the strange in the familiar, or look at, I always say, okay, if I'm frustrated that this didn't go my way, what's the opposite of this? Oh, I would have been perfect. And I would, say I didn't get the job. Okay, well, what's the opposite? I would have got the job and all this stuff. But what are the benefits of not getting the job? Well, I have more time. Is that job something I really wanted, or was I doing it because I needed the money and all this stuff? Maybe now I have a little bit more free time. So, what's the positives? And then what's the middle stance? Does it really matter in the overall scheme of things? No, tomorrow's another day, And so even just saying to be neutral about something is doing something new, especially if have the habit of reacting. If somebody says something to you and you react, your immediate reactions, and this happens a lot with family, we get triggered, right? This person's pushing your buttons and they know how. And and instead of getting angry, you take that deep breath and you say, oh, thank you for sharing that with me. I don't see things the same way. But you mentioned it before, the great pause or something, right? That deep
Yes,
breath.
the great pause. Jason
Yeah.
Estes calls it the great pause, and it's an
Yeah.
amazing thing. So basically, he says, like, if you want to go back to your divinity, he says, just take a pause and say, for example, I commit to pick up this glass and take a sip of water, and I have to do it now because I did it. It's a great pause, and then he says, I commit to put this glass back on the table, and I put the glass back on the table. And that's it's brilliant practice. I already feel the shift that I'm present. I'm aligned, I'm divine, I'm present. That's all it takes. Just make that pause and commit to do something. You have to do it though. It's that simple.
Mhm.
And he was also talking about, being, nice versus kind.
Yeah.
In this day and age, everybody's trying to be nice. And that's so detrimental to us.
Mhm.
It truly is. All that you're required to do is be kind. Be kind, but be authentic. Because if you vibrate at the frequency of authenticity, it is 4,000 times higher than the love that you give to other people.
Mhm.
Because as we said earlier, like, we are all individual, unique energetic stamp in this life, right? And you're supposed to be that expression of God. right? There is a little icon within you, and you're supposed to be you. I'm supposed to be me. I'm supposed to act out of, you know, my unfolding history, right? I'm supposed to do what I'm supposed to do, right? Obviously, as human being, we're supposed to be kind, but if you're nice, more often than not, you do stuff because you think you're required, it's not aligned with you, and it just harms you. And you're
Mhm.
phony and you're not authentic. So be authentic and be kind, but be authentic.
Yeah, I love that. And often we just, I think that stems from being a kid and depending on how you're brought up. Oh, you want to be a good boy, you want to be nice, you want to get good grades, you want to make sure, and it's okay, at an age, but then because when you're young and you're growing up, your parents take care of you and stuff like that. And then you get to, when you have to go into the real world and things like that. And it's like you realize that sometimes being nice is not, like you said, it's detrimental. It's learning to have good boundaries for yourself, spiritual boundaries, what Eckhart Tolle calls high quality no's. Like, I've done that in the past where it's like, oh yeah, yeah, like, like it's like say a friend calling you and saying let's go out tonight, and really giving you the yeah, like, really convincing you, and maybe sometimes that's good. You got to get out of your comfort zone, if you're stuck in your mind. But also it's okay to say, like, there's been times where I think being nice comes from a lack mentality where, oh, I only have a few friends. If I'm not nice to the ones I have, well, then they're not gonna be my friend. And then, so I got to please them. I got to make sure, and it's just a slippery slope, right? Because then you start becoming inauthentic to please other people, right? So you're not grounded in who you are and what you want to do in the direction that you want to go in your life. And that I see it, it's happened within my own family, it's happened within me. Anything that I talk about, I can't say that I haven't experienced myself, because I don't feel that you should talk about things that you haven't experienced or tell people to, you mentioned about people being coaches and stuff, and not, it's like, well, if you haven't gone through that stuff, what right do you have to tell me it? Like, I had a friend who was a quit smoking counselor and she never smoked. And I was like, that seems, you're not qualified to tell me how to quit smoking. I can tell you how to quit smoking because I was addicted to smoking cigarettes for 26 years, so I can tell you how to do it. But if you've never gone through something, I wouldn't trust you to climb a mountain, to guide me up a mountain if you've never done it before, So it's the same kind of thing. So I think that the kindness starts with yourself too, right? Because often we I know in the past that I've degraded my own value, thinking that, oh, like that's the small ego, the little poor old me, the little story about, oh, I don't have anything to offer the world, and things like that. So you're nice to others, and we degrade our own spiritual integrity and our own divinity, um, because we're not taught. And I think that stems from religious things, that God's outside of us. We're not taught to honor. I don't need to ask a priest to get a message to God. I just have to go within my heart, you know? And we weren't raised like that, at least not all of us. So that's I'm not saying that I'm, not knocking religion. If people are still in that, that's fine. Everybody's got their own journey. But I realized at a very young age where I think in my grade 8 classes, we had about 8 grade 8, or I forget how many grade 8 classes, but there were a couple hundred, probably at least 100 kids with all their families. And I didn't do my confirmation in grade 8. I decided against it. And there was only me and another kid, say, I don't know however many grade 8 classes at our school. There was only 2 of us that said, no, we're not doing it. And it was like we were standing at the back to support all of our friends. I still went to the service, but I was like, I'm not doing that. And that was my in grade 8, that was my segue out of religion. And I would
Yeah.
still go here and there to, I'd go to a mass with my grandma or my mom once in a while, but now even so, I hardly ever go. It's just, it's not my place. I don't feel there's any spirituality or connection to God there. It's just not for me, right? I'm being inauthentic if I go.
Well, what's the worst thing that the religion did that the religion did to people was to keep you stuck with worshiping them, actually, going frequently, to visit them, give them donations and whatnot, as opposed to do their job to actually help you make that connection with divinity yourself.
Mhm.
Right. So if they did have some secret knowledge or some special knowledge, and if they did it themselves, if they connected with God, they were supposed to teach you. And the worst thing, and the greatest damage they did to Orthodox Christians was that they make you believe that you're not good enough to know.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not good enough. Oh my God, don't go there, because it's like as if you put finger in a socket and you get zapped, God is gonna burn you to death or whatever. I'm thinking like, seriously? Who makes you be better than me? Maybe I am on a higher spiritual level than you are, buddy. 1,000 times over. So that they did a lot of good things along the way, but then they did some detrimental damage to many souls. But yeah, be authentic. Feel what you feel, see who you are, and make that direct connection, because it just it's difficult when you listen to them. They try to teach you the right thing. And then there's actually one verse in Bible, and people, I drive people crazy when I just circle back and say, you know what? It says there is a warning in the Bible that says, do as they teach you, but stay away from what they're doing. Right?
Yeah.
Because they read out of the book, they tell you the truth, some of the truth, right? But then when you see them, what they do and what they practically make you do is like not absolutely, like in line with what they're teaching, right? So if they tell you that there is icon of God within you, right? So how come that, you're technically God yourself, particle of God,
Mhm.
enabled, and and you have that connection, right? But that's what in the dark ages, that was the idea, make them think that there is a separation, right? So there was illusion of separation, that we were disconnected from the source, even though we were always connected with it.
Yeah.
So we're never disconnected, but our mind is so highly programmable, and they know exactly how it works, and they can use it against you. So
Mhm.
if you're not educated in that, like, how your mind works, and what's the consequence of every thought that you have, they can basically do anything they want to you.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that it's so easily programmable, and you don't realize that what you see on the TV is not necessarily really happening. Or, it's a mind control with an agenda and a narrative. It's essentially propaganda to push people in a certain direction, push voters in a certain direction, push the population, society in a certain direction, men, women, children, the congregation, all these things that are these power control structures. And you gotta do's, you gotta be, you gotta sign up for the group, you gotta do the weekly thing and this and that. And I actually liked the meeting that you held where we all just sat in a circle. And it's funny because I was telling somebody that it's like, I'm not going to church unless, like, I don't want to hear one pastor or one priest, the same person week after week talking about the same 2,000-year-old text, which is a script. So if you think about script, it's like everybody's reading this script. What scripts go for movies? Well, it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Everybody's going to create that reality because they're following the same script. If I got everybody to read the same script, of course the prophecy is going to come true because everybody's manifesting it and making it come true. So I said I'm not partaking in that. So, but I was like, I would go to church if it was everybody once a week or whatever, if everybody got up and talked about their life and their journey. And we actually, went around the circle. I think there was about 20 of us last week when we did it, and everybody talked about their journey. And I think to me that was much more powerful than listening to somebody's interpretation of a dead scripture. I heard a saying recently, I don't know where it was, but it was like the scriptures are dead. I think it might have been from the Essene Gospel of Peace and something else that I heard, but it was like the scriptures are dead, Jesus is dead, worship your life. If you want to worship something, go out, go for a walk in nature. You're alive right now. You are God. You're manifesting. This is creation. Get out of your head, get into your heart, and go live a zestful life, worship life if you want to worship something, because there's so much beauty in the world that you're not going to have access to if you're stuck inside a building or in a confession booth and all this stuff. And not, I don't like to knock it too much because it maybe it has its purpose, but I found more God, more spirituality, more source on my motorcycle on Sunday mornings going through the quiet country roads than I ever found, on my knees at a church. So that's just my personal experience, not to knock other people's, right?
But you know what? This is circling back to what we spoke about, knowledge versus wisdom, right?
Yeah.
So even those priests, that's what they're taught in the school, and that's the book they go by.
Yeah.
And if they didn't experience something, how they can help you with anything. It's the same like, having a coach or psychiatrist or somebody trying to help you if you're suicidal, but they have never been suicidal.
Mhm.
Right? So how can you possibly have that wisdom within you?
Yeah.
That fiber of the divine message will not be able to go through you if you
Yeah.
didn't have something similar. You're just not on the same frequency, right? So, I mean, there is a reason why back in the day you had a group of elders leading the society because they lived, they lived a long life. They gained that wisdom. They didn't read books. They lived life, and that's when they were able to tell you that, right? Like in the Eastern Church, they knew that. They knew that. So in the Orthodox Church, priests must be married,
Mhm.
right? Because they say you have to have wife, you have to have kids to understand this poor guy who comes to complain to you, right?
Yeah.
What the problem is, right?
Yeah.
Now the problem is if they have a happy marriage, they will not understand me if I didn't have a happy marriage, right? And they will give you all kinds of false and bad advice because to them that's marriage is sacred and like you cannot possibly divorce or whatever.
Yeah.
Even if it costs you a life. I mean, it goes, that dogma goes that far that basically they tell you like, well, if the guy kills you, it's better for you because you're gonna gain heaven and you'll be, you will save the soul and better than to do something to whatever. So it's really unbelievable sometimes because people don't engage their whole being, right? Like if you do
Mhm.
like if you do anything and you just read a book and you get certificate and you just do it without giving much thought, without running that, embodying that knowledge in this way or the other. Like it's just like, if you give it to others, it doesn't bring much benefit. Actually it can cause damage,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And that's the thing. So I think what that's, like you said, bringing heaven to earth and creating it, it's, I really like the saying that I read recently in The Way of Mastery that the decision for the kingdom is it's just a decision away. Everybody's got their own path. And like I was kind of joking, I think it was before we started recording it, you could go, to a monastery in Tibet and meditate for 17 years. You might have that same aha moment walking down the street or having a beer in a local pub. There's no guide to spirituality. There's no prescription. I always used to say in high school, I don't always do things by the book because, in my opinion, whoever wrote it wasn't necessarily right. And everybody's got their own book. We're all our own universes, like you said, we're all a fractal of source. Divinity here, expressing love into form, what it's like to be a Mira, a Rob, or whoever, everybody. That's why it's so beautiful to see so many different diverse types of people, is that I see that and I say, oh, that's another version of me experiencing what it's like to be them. So it makes the experience that much richer. It's not us versus them. It's just all of us. It's all of us. That's what it is. And like you said, they've tried to convince of the separation, and everybody thinks that oneness is like we're not all one necessarily. We are all connected, but we're all individuals. We're all. That's what my Rob Anderson show is. We all have our raw band is frequency band. So we all have our unique raw source frequencies that make up who we are, right? And like you said, I think that stays with us forever. It doesn't die when this body that's a physical vessel passes on, but our spirit, our source essence, or our light moves on with that experience, and it's all very good. It was like, thank you for that experience, and time to go on to the next one, right?
Yeah, we all share the same source and the same essence, right? So we're basically like a drop of water in an ocean, right? So ocean
Mhm.
is one thing, big body mass of water, but we're like one drop. So in a sense, we're all connected because of the same source and same essence, but we have unique expression of that source.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so we're supposed to have different experiences, and not everyone's path is the same. Like even this path to awakening or moving on to next dimension. I personally think that we're moving into fifth density of the third dimension rather than fifth dimension. But we shall see. However, it's very interesting to notice, as you know, as I said, like my passion is mind in observing people, how they handle things. My observation is even those people who are generally on a good path and following the true light, there's a resistance. There's a resistance to make that first step into the new land, right? And we're waiting. We're all waiting for something. We're waiting to see something's happening, and then we will join and step. We're waiting for someone else to build that new world, and then we will step into it, right? There is a resistance because we're the very first generation that's doing this. Back in the day, if there was an ascension, you know, people would be all dead, there would be destruction on the planet, and then their souls would ascend into a new realm or a higher realm. Now we're doing it with our body. We're taking our body with us. And we're the very first generation who is doing that. There is no generational experience, transgenerational memory, no cellular memory. There's absolutely nothing you can lean on. So this rule of the mind that, you know, that's preventing you from something that's unfamiliar, even if you can hardly wait to see that heaven on earth, you're still resisting, probably subconsciously. You're not even aware of it, but I feel it, and I notice that in people. And when I ask them, okay, so what is the first tangible step you can take? Let's start building that heaven on earth, like from this corner. Let's just make a table in a heaven of earth. Let's just, you know, my one wall. Like let's do something, right? What do you think that is? Nobody knows.
Yeah.
And we don't, because we are just about to create that new reality from scratch with our collective thinking, collective mind, and collective effort. But it's very interesting to see how mind can play tricks on you. And I think that's exactly why it's necessary for us to raise our consciousness and completely unplug from the false matrix from the inverted matrix that we are run by, all those programs that we were run by, you know, for generations, where everything was opposite, everything was inverted, everything was 180 degrees opposite from what truth is. And only then, when we get out of that false programming and inverting programming, we will actually see the truth and realize what is our true essence. And that's when we will know what our next step is. And I think that's happening very shortly, very quickly. My understanding is, from what Jason Estes says, that 22 people made it the other day. So we have 22 people who unplugged from the false matrix, exactly like, you know, movie Matrix tells you. And they are now seeing the true essence, and they will lead the humanity to that first step, which is very, very, very powerful and exciting.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to bring it on home. And because, you know, I like all that stuff that you said to just take those little tangible steps day in, day out. Even if you just take one step, it's a massive step. There, I heard recently some gentleman say, life is a marathon, not a 100-meter dash. So, you know, it's just little steps. It's choosing differently. It's reacting differently. Today, it's maybe it's deciding to, you know what, I'm going to learn to play the piano. Like that's why I started learning to fly. I'm 40, and it's like I'm doing it anyways, and it's been a few-year process. But when I was during the pandemic, I read about this lady. It was on this thing that we were doing, and it was a post about, you know, getting out of our own head and how the pandemic actually helped people maybe do things that they'd been putting off. And so she said she was 62, and she started learning to play the piano, and in 2 years, like, she's very good at playing the piano now. And there was another gentleman, he was sharing his story, and he was like 75 years old, and he's going to get his pilot's license. So it's doing things like that. It's getting out of our own mind, removing that self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, I can't, I'm too old, I'm too this, I'm too that. Oh, it runs in the family. Oh, it's all that mind past programming. So it's like, instead of living from your past, take that idea from the future. I like the idea of reel in your future. So just a little bit like fishing, like cast out, and you know what you want to bring in, and just slowly but surely you reel in different patterns of habits, behaviors, different levels of consciousness, different, and really getting rid of your story, you know, because a lot of people, it's like, sometimes, you know, it's as simple as if you're waiting for an apology from somebody else or something, or you have this relationship block. Sometimes it's saying, you know what, takes two to tango. Maybe I should just call and apologize to them. You know, maybe that's the step you take today. And there's no book to it. You have to listen to your heart, and your heart will tell you what that little step is today. Maybe it's like I said, I don't know if it was we were on the call when I said that, but it's like maybe it's, you know, getting rid of that last thing that your ex gave you, or, you know, putting a final nail in the coffin, or going home to your hometown and letting it go with love. There's lots of things we can do. So
Yeah, first of all, release all the luggage, right?
yeah,
Release all the resentment, all the trauma, everything. You will have to leave everything behind to step into the new. And energies are so supportive now, right? Something would take you like 15 years back in a day to do, and now you can accomplish within 3 weeks. We're going to start, our mind is going to start manifesting so fast because energies are there to support us. So
yeah,
everything you want to learn, it's now much faster.
yeah.
It's manifesting so fast. So like, yeah, you know, it's never too late to start anything, and because you're supported and you can do anything pretty much you want now. These new energies.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And so thank you so much for coming on. Stick around and we'll have a little bit debrief, but I'll get ready to sign off. So thank you once again, Mira. I really
You're welcome.
appreciate it. Thank you for the in-person thing that we did last week. That was very lovely. And yeah, it was wonderful. So and I look forward to having another conversation with you on the show, and maybe we should do it again in a couple months.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. Thank you so much, Rob.
All right, take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.